Right, hello and good afternoon. Thank you for coming to today's webinar, an introduction to more advanced reporting needs with interactive custom reports in Sage Intacct. I'm Sarah Novak, Marketing Manager at LBMC Technology Solutions. I just want to go over a few housekeeping items real quick before we get started. All the phone lines are muted, so if you have any difficulties, please let us know using the chat panel. We'll be taking questions throughout today's webinar, and we'll answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. And if not, we'll be sure to follow up. You can submit questions at any time via the questions panel in WebEx. And this webinar is eligible for CPE. So in order to qualify for the 2 CPE credits, you must stay on the entire session and make sure to answer any polling questions when prompted. We'll be recording the session and we'll be sending that out in a few days' time in addition to the slides. So at this time, I would like to introduce you to Laura Burge, who is an Intacct consultant with us. And we really appreciate you joining us today. And Laura, I will turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Sarah. We are going to be going over Interactive Custom Report Writer for the first part of this presentation, and then we'll move on to highlight some new features and releases that Intacct has added with with release 1 for 2021. So let's get started with Interactive Custom Report Writer. First thing to note is ICRW is a visual reporting tool. You don't need to be a programmer. If you have some handy Excel skills with conditional formatting or functions like formula, then you're going to be fine with ICRW. ICRW allows us to build basic reports quickly. We can use pivot tables and filter the data easily. When building reports, we have the ability to drag and drop columns and fields. We can group data together. We can subtotal that data. We can format the data, and there's options to add calculated columns as well. The thing about ICRW that's very beneficial is you receive a live preview of the reports as you're building them. So when you add information and data in, you can see what that does to your report, how the information is pulled in, and how it's structured. There are currently over 60 standard reports in ICRW. And here's the latest list that we have. The ICRW report library provides, like I said, access to over 60 standard reports. The visibility of these reports is dependent upon the applications that you're subscribed to in your environment. The standard report library is continually being expanded with each new quarterly release, and these reports can be duplicated and used to create new custom reports. There are 2 types of licenses for ICRW. There's a run-only, which will allow you to use the standard reports in this library. And then there's a license for full access, where you can write reports, create reports, edit reports, and obviously view those reports as well. So our first polling question today is, do you currently have a person who is dedicated to writing custom reports on your team? The answers could be yes, it's myself, another team member, an internal IT team, or no. So I'll give you all just a few minutes to answer that question.
Okay, it looks like almost everybody has answered. We have about 30 more seconds, but Laura, if you want to go ahead and continue.
Absolutely. Okay. So there are 3 tabs when building a report in ICRW. We have the Define tab, the Refine tab, and a Prompts tab. The Define tab is going to allow us to see all of the different dimensions and attributes and measures that are available in ICRW. This will allow you to build your report using columns. We have the group fields or reporting areas that make it easy to find the related data. The second tab that we have is the Refine tab. This is a visual of the report. This tab is where you can go to see what your report looks like as you're building it. You can drag and drop columns to be able to easily add or move columns around. You can move columns into prompts, which will allow your end user to sort and filter the data in a different way in which the report is created. The Refine tab also has smart menus to manage the components. You can show totals. You can show the top 5 or the bottom 5 performers. You can exclude the column. And again, you can move these around either to columns or sections or up in the top for prompts. And then the live data is what you will actually see as you're building the report, and it's the information that your end user will see. Then on the final tab, it's prompts. This tab allows you to create different prompts for your end user when running or viewing the report. They can choose things like a date range or a period or a project or a customer or a vendor. And we'll see all of that when we have our demo at the end. The next area that we have is actually building a report. There are a few things to consider when you're building a report. You want to select the correct reporting area. Intacct has made it easier by providing detail of the information available in each of the reporting areas down at the bottom of the screen. So in this instance, where we're choosing to build a report based on AP bills, we'll see the header, we'll see the detailer, the detail. We'll see all the dimensions, labels, amounts, GL accounts, projects, vendors, customers, anything that's related to that AP bill. You want to make sure that all of the information that you need is included in this description. You'll start at the lowest level of detail that contains the data. Once you create the report, you want to be sure to preview your reports often, and most importantly, save them as you go. Okay, so what are reporting areas? When we create an interactive custom report, like I said, you want to select the reporting area on which the report will be based. To make it easier to determine which reporting area to choose, reporting area names correspond to the types of information that they contain, such as AP bills or AP payments or AR invoices. When you select the reporting area, the system gets the data from Intacct to use in that report. So as you can see at the top, we've got the reporting area listed. And then underneath that, we have folders. So the AP bill detail is housed in the folder itself. And then we have attributes, dimensions, measures, and related objects. The attribute folder contains fields such as vendor name or account. The measure columns has amounts and other financial data from the transactions, such as a base currency amount. The the related objects folder are going to have information that is the highest level in the reporting area, such as AP account or entity or AP bill itself. You'll drag and drop columns or double click on these from the reporting area section to the columns section, which will add the columns to your report. Okay, combining reporting areas. This has been a function that, or a feature that a lot of people have been interested in because it allows you to combine different areas of Intacct. For example, you could combine AP and AR. You could combine AP invoice detail with AP payment detail. You can cross modules, and you can also pull information in from transactions that are within the module but housed in a separate area. One thing to note is that if you specify one operation for combined columns, you can only have that one operation in one set of columns. You can't apply different operations to different columns in the report. So the columns you're combining must be the same data type, and you must have the same number of columns for each module or reporting area that you're pulling in. If you have information in one module that's text and another that's numbers, you cannot pull that information in one column. They'll have to be two separate columns. Like I said before, you can select the columns from the same reporting area or from different reporting areas, such as cross modules. But the columns must have at least one item in common for those two data tables to be linked together. There are a few limitations when using different modules. These are combining hierarchy columns, selection steps, or groups. This is not supported at this time, and you can only add prompts with standard time dimensions. Right now, ICRW doesn't support prompts other than standard time dimensions when choosing time periods. There are 4 ways to display the rows. You can return only non-duplicated rows in all columns. You can return rows from all columns, including duplicated rows. You can return only one common row to all columns, or you can return only rows from the first column that aren't included in a second. Okay, so the other thing that ICRW allows you to do is add filters and selection steps to your report. The filters limit the data that's pulled into the reports when retrieving the information. If you have a large volume of data and want to limit that to, say, a specific region or a specific area, this will allow the report to run and refresh faster. So filters are going to limit what comes into the report. Excuse me. You can create filters based on columns that are going to be included in the report. You can also hide columns in the report and yet still have filters based on those columns. You can also have complex and or logic. For example, you could say journal entries that are in draft and journal entries that are approved. Or you could use the or function for that as well. You'll also have standard operators such as is equal to, is in, contains all, contains any. There's a list of about 20 different options for standard operators. They also include things like including nulls or excluding nulls, which are blank sets of data. The selection steps further refine the data that's displayed in the report after the initial selection. It does not control the data included in the report, and it only applies to attribute columns. Next, we can add column filters within our report while we're building and once the report is run. The good thing about adding column filters is you also have the ability to remove them as well, both in the report and for the end user. some examples of this. You can keep only the top number or bottom number of data based on any measure column that's displayed in the report. You can keep only data where a measure column is greater than a value of another measure column. You can also remove members from the report. So this example that we see uses column filters to display the top 5 unpaid invoices. You can keep only the invoices where the total paid is less than the transaction amount, so it's a partial payment, or keep only the top 5 invoices based on a transaction amount. ICRW also allows you to drill down to a source document. When you create your reports, there are several different areas within Intacct that will allow you to do this, such as a document ID, a journal entry, an invoice, a vendor bill. You'll get a blue hyperlink within the report. As long as your end user has permission to see that information, they can click on the link and it will open that for you. That is what that looks like. Okay, so we have our next poll question. Are you currently exporting reports from Intacct and manually creating calculations and pivot tables in Excel each month? Yes or no?
Okay, we have about 45 more seconds, but it looks like most everyone has finished. Laura, if you'd like to continue.
Okay. Intacct provides quite a bit of flexibility to add functions in a calculated column. Excuse me. We have functions that we can add. We have filters that we can add. We can pick and choose which columns or variables we want to include. We have simple math, such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. The percentage option, which is up at the top, will divide by 100. And we also have a concatenate feature, which will join 2 items together. If you click on the F, which is the first button there on the left, which is the functions box, you're presented with a list of options: aggregate, running aggregate, string math, calendar dates, conversions, and expressions. So all of your standard functions are available in here. They're very similar to using Excel formulas and functions. The terminology on occasion can be a little bit different. For example, in expressions, we have case if, which is like an if statement in Excel. When you select a function out of the folder, the dialog box will show the formula in a description. So on the right-hand side, where we've chosen case if, we're going to see the syntax or the formula, where it says case when, request condition 1, then do this action, or else do this action, then end. So down at the bottom, you're going to see the description. It says this form is the case statement, evaluates each when condition, and if it's satisfied or true in Excel, assign the value in the corresponding then expression. If none of the when conditions are satisfied or considered true, then it will assign the default value that's specified in the X or else expression. So if no X else expression is specified, the system will automatically add an else of null, which means it will leave it blank. So there are a lot of calculation functions that are available in ICRW. And let's look at some of those. Okay, so in this example, we have used functions in a calculation column. So in the, and I'll show you where this is in just a few minutes, but when you click the F button, the function button, to display the insert function dialog box, this is what you're going to see in the calculation as far as the formula is concerned. And what we've written here is if a payment method is credit card, then display the credit card description. Otherwise, display the bank name. So the premise behind this report is we have columns that have a bank name, a description, the financial account, the payment method, the amount, etc. So when the payment type is credit card, then it uses the credit card description or put the bank name. Okay, so when we add a calculated column, it's going to allow you to perform different calculations on your data. So from the Refine tab, you're going to click on the calculation column icon, and it's highlighted up at the top in the little red box. In this example, we chose to calculate the days to pay, which is in the column off to the far right. It'll calculate the days to pay for each bill, which is the date fully paid less the due date, and it's blank for bills that have not been paid yet. So if you look at the formula, we see there's a column called AP bill when paid, and then we added the minus function, and then we added the column when due. It adds the column out to the right, the calculated column to the right, and it provides the days to pay for each bill. Okay. Intacct also allows us to build pivot tables, which are extremely useful for your end user. In this example, we have a location, a department, and we've chosen to expand the pivot table by time. So Houston has professional services, and the end user has decided to look at not only the total, but each period as it's defined. So for example, first alert customer has a total of $9,000 due, and we were able to expand the pivot table to show us that 1,500 of that came in the year 2015, and 7,500 of that came in the year 2016. The pivot tables can be set up in this example for customers by location, department, and time. It's very easy to set these up in ICRW. You can also create prompts based on locations, departments, customers, vendors, and many more different dimensions that are available in Intacct. The prompt is available at runtime by the end user. You create column prompts by selecting a specific variable on the report. In this case, we chose bill date. You create a presentation valuable prompt allowing you to collect input that is not based on a column. And then you can preview the prompts while building your report. This will allow you to view the prompts and then see how the information is displayed in real time. You can also use column and presentation value or variable prompts in filters. Okay, we have our next polling question. How many users in your company build reports in Intacct? 0 to 5, 6 to 10, or more than 10?
Okay, we have about a minute left for this question, but I just wanted to remind everyone throughout the presentation, if you want to go ahead and submit your questions, we'll make sure to get to those at the end of the presentation. Okay, we have about 30 seconds left. Laura, you can go ahead. We have almost all of them submitted.
Okay. All right. Now the fun part. We're going to watch a demo that will go through each of these steps. We're going to create a report in ICRW. We'll create it. We'll add our columns. We'll save it. I'll show you how to share it with a menu in the module, and then show you what it looks like for the end user when they run that out of the module. Okay. All right, so we're in one of our demo environments, and we're going to, I'm going to switch levels here. All right, and we're going to go to our reporting section. In the report section on the All tab, down at the bottom under Advanced Reports, it's Interactive Custom Reports. So once we click, we're going to get a listing of all of the reports that we have created. Up at the top, if you click on Report Library, it will show you all of the out-of-the-box reports with ICRW that are available. And of course, they're based on your application or your modules that you have configured. So if you didn't have projects, then those particular reports would not show in your list in the report library. So they've got the name of the report, the application, the reporting area. You have the ability to run these. You also have the ability to edit these. Best practice would be when you edit these. For example, if you click edit, if you have the full access user license, it's going to open. Over here on the right is a save as, which is similar to the duplicate button in other areas of Intacct. So click save as, give it a new name, and then click OK. That will allow you to keep this report intact for you to use it later, but also allow you to make changes to it by creating essentially a duplicated report. Okay, so now we're back in the custom reports for the interactive custom reports. So we're going to click add. Okay, so this is a screen that you're going to see when you go to add a report in the ICRW world. You can create from an existing report as well, which was the same as the duplicated feature that I showed you earlier using the save as. You can also create a new report. Reporting area is going to give you all of the different available areas in ICRW. We have AP at the top. Here are all of your different options. We have adjustment, bills, payments, and it goes down the list for the modules that you have in your environment. AR, cash management, construction, contracts, etc. So one thing that I like, and this is very similar to the other areas in Intacct, we're going to build a timesheet report. So if you click T, you have any reports that start with T. So timesheets, we're going to call this just so it's easy to find later. You can include a report audience and a report type if you would like. Best practice, although tempting, is not to check this box down at the bottom for report options. This box says to create automatically a standard periods filter and prompt in your report. If you have reporting time periods that are not considered standard, those will not populate in the report if you check this box. There's another option for time periods when you get to the user prompts. And when you set up a time-based user prompt, you will have the ability to pick beginning and ending dates or a period, and it will be the periods that are in your environment. Okay, so we're going to click report. Okay, so when ICRW opens, it opens to the Refine tab. Right now, we don't have any columns, so our report is essentially blank. Like we went over before, the Define tab is where you're going to start adding columns. You can create filters. Each column can have a different set of filters, but this is the easiest place to start. All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a report for timesheets, and there's certain information that we want to look for. So we're going to add hours, billable hours, non-billable hours, a state of the timesheet, a project name that's associated with the timesheet, and a task name. So when we open this header folder for timesheet entries, the first option we see is attributes. And attributes contain individual records within an area. So we're going to make this a little bit bigger so we can see more. So you have time-related attributes, and then you also have other related attributes, such as whether or not a project is billable or billed, different names. You can flip down through here to see all of the different available options, departments, location, employees, entry dates. The list is rather large. Oops. Okay. And then we have dimensions. So in this case, you can choose from customer information, department information, employee, task, project. Down in measures, this is going to include amounts from the transactions. It would help if I scroll down. So this is where we'll find our hours, an external billing rate, utilized hours, non-utilized hours, approved hours, and then down in the related objects. These are related to the highest level folders in that reporting area. So AP detail might have related objects from the AP record as an example. So in timesheet, again, we have some different attributes. All right, let's make them smaller and we'll start finding our objects. So the other thing that I'll make mention of if you're building reports, some of this information you can get to in the different folders, and it's similar. Sometimes the information is named the same as far as what they call it, like vendor name, for example. But when you go in to find what you're looking for, what you're going to find is where that information is housed. So for department, and this might not be a good one. you'll see it listed in several different places. I can show you that in a little bit. This probably isn't a good one to do. Okay, so we want to add hours to our timesheet, and hours are going to be in measures. So we'll scroll down here. There's hours. You can either click and drag and drop it, or you can double click. So I'm just going to double click. Okay, we also want to include billable hours. So we'll double click there. We want to include non-billable hours. And let's see, our state, our timesheet is going to be in related objects. Let's see. Project name is going to be in dimensions. And project. Yep. Okay, I'm going to show you another little trick that I find handy. So there's a search magnifying glass up here, which brings up a search box. So the other thing that we wanted to find to add to this report was task name. So if you type it in, sometimes it doesn't go away. It will search all of the times and areas in which task name is available. So if you have a report that you're building and say entity is listed 10 times, it's going to show you which area, reporting area that's in. So for task name, we have the parent task, we have a root task, we just have task. And in this case, for task name, we have an on timesheet entry. So that's the one we're going to choose. Okay, so now we have our columns that we've added from our Define tab. When we go to the Refine tab, it's going to show us what our report looks like in real time because we just ran it. Something that is a neat little feature, as you can see, it's a little more difficult to see because my screen is small, where you have the scroll bar to go right and left. We don't want that. Our report is small enough that we don't need to see that. So we have the ability to view the properties, and we can fix the spacing. So as you can see, we no longer have the left and right scroll bar. There are other things, options that you can include in table properties. You can include 0 or rows with only 0 numbers. You can enable an alternate style. You can repeat in each row. So those are some options that we have. Click that. Okay, you can also edit the title. If you don't want the title to be what you named your report, you can uncheck displayed save name and we can change it. So we'll call it timesheet. Click done. So that's going to save our title, which is really handy if you've named your report something that makes sense to you as the builder or the creator, but you want your end user to see a different title. You can also select not to have a title at all if you choose. Okay. So this is our Refine tab, and this shows us our information in real time. So if we want to move the project name, because we want it on the left, we can do that while we're building the report. Anything that we save while we're building or creating a report will be saved for the end users. The end users who maybe don't have access to a full license will be able to do this in their environment as well when they run the reports. So let's move some of these over. That was a drop and drag. You simply click here and drag it. The other option is to right click on the header and we can move the column to the left. So that's option 2. So now we've got our project name, we've got our task name, we've got our hours that we wanted, and we have our state, which is approved, I think for most of these right now. If you wanted your end user to view the report when the report opens, when they go to run it with a prompt, we can drag this up to the top. And now we can filter by name. I should have looked to see which ones are in here. Okay. And then it will update. You can also drag prompts back down. Okay. Excuse me. If we wanted to add a subtotal to each of these projects, or any of these columns for that matter, if you right-click on the column that you want to add a subtotal, go down about halfway, show subtotal, and we can choose none or after values. So now we have a subtotal for each project name. We can also add a grand total, which will give us a grand total for the report down at the bottom. Okay. So that's how we add subtotals, and that's how we add a grand total. This is also where you can sort your column, ascending, descending. You can have multiple sorts in columns. This is our first sort. You'll pick one of these top 2. If it's your second sort, then you can add it. So it would be your second sort in your table or in your information. Okay, so let's do a little filtering now so we can see how this report changes. Click off that. Okay, so for Benford implementation here, we've got different tasks 1 through 6. So let's say we just want to see task 1, 2, and 3. That's all we want the report to build in, or report to bring in. When you go to the Refine tab, we can find the project name and we can add a filter. So we're going to say that the project name is equal to or is in, and then we can select our, oops, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do task. Okay, so the task name is equal to or is in, and then we can pick task 1, 2, and 3. You can also click search at the bottom and choose the filter selections with starts, contains, ends, and do it that way as well in case you have a long list. And then click OK. So now when we go to our Refine tab, the only information that ICRW pulled into this report was task 1, 2, and 3. So like I said earlier, this limits the volume of data that it pulls in, and it allows your reports to run faster when you initially launch them and when your end users are using the reports. Okay, so this is not pretty, the column headers, because we've got project name and then where in the Intacct environment that the information came from. So we're going to change that. So in project name, we're going to go to column properties and column format. So we have the ability to make our column titles user-friendly, and we do that by clicking custom headings. So we'll take this out and we'll change the name to remove column or the table at the end. We also have the option to hide a column. We also have the option to suppress or repeat the information in the column. So right now we had it at suppress, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so the project name is now a little more user-friendly. It doesn't have the added table link at the end of it. But this is what the column looks like when it's suppressed. For those that use Excel, download or export reports into Excel, repeating this information is very useful because it will list the project name on each row in Excel. So to do that, we're going to go back to project name, column properties, column format, and repeat. And then we're going to go to our refine tab. So now it repeats. So if this information is either processed or downloaded into Excel, it makes it a little more user-friendly if you use Excel for that purpose. The other thing that we can do that I'll show you really quick is add conditional formatting to columns within ICRW. So for task name, I'm going to click here. We're going to go back to column properties and we're going to add a conditional format. So we'll add a condition. We're going to use task name. We're going to use task 1. We're going to say okay. And then we're going to go back to this. It's going to bring up the style format. So for anything that contains task 1 in that list, we're going to give it a color. Let's give it a blue. And then say okay. And say okay. And now when we look at our report, anything that has task 1 in the task name is going to show highlighted in blue. So that's a good way to draw attention to what end users need to see, perhaps as a priority. Okay. For prompts, we can add prompts in here. This is where we can add a column prompt or add a variable prompt if there's not a column already in the report. So the prompt will add to our project name. You can add a description if you would like. We can allow end users to pick the project that they're working on, or any of these other available operations, whether it's greater than a certain number, greater than or equal to a number. For dates, we would use in between. We can also use, does not contain, ends with, a whole variety of things. So in the choice list and radio buttons, I think, are probably my favorite. Radio buttons will only allow you to choose one one selection. Choice list will give you some options. So if you click on more options, you can check enable user to select multiple values. So if you wanted the user to be able to select 3 locations or 4 locations, anything other than 1, you would check this box. Okay, so now we have our prompt. If you want to see what the prompt and report looks like while we're still creating the report, you click right here, and it's going to allow you to select, we'll select these 2, the project, and then okay. And it's going to run it for you. Okay. And I was bad. I did not save this as I went along. So I should do that now. Okay. So we have our columns. We have a filter. We can view our report as we build. And we've added our prompts. Okay. And we saved it. So now we can go back to interactive custom reports. We did this one. We can add it to a menu. So it gives us the name. It gives us the application. We can choose from any application that you have in your environment. Click add to menu and save. So now in your end user, refresh. So now when your end user goes to that menu, selects all, custom reports, our custom report is there. Okay, and here's our prompt. So we can either select, and you can add as many as you would like, or you can remove them. We'll just remove them. If you leave this blank, it will bring up every project that has information in it. And then we'll click View. Okay. So now we see our report with our project name, our task name, all of the hours, and the state of each timesheet. So this is what your end user is going to see. All of these columns can be dragged and dropped. We can do like we did when we were building and move a project up to the top, where we can choose the projects to view. We can also right click and move it back to columns. We can decide that we want to see total hours off to the right, so we can drag and drop there. Oops. Sometimes, and I don't know why it does this, you lose the drag and drop function if you do it a few times. So we can sort the columns. We can exclude the columns, we can move the columns. One thing to notice is for your end user right now, the project name is what's driving the rest of the columns in the report. So if we were to move this, where we move task to the left, now we're going to see everything that is, every project that has task 1 on it first, and then task 2 second, and task 3 third. So just keep in mind that when users move columns after the report has been created, that it will reconfigure how that information is pulled in. So here we have project name, and that is our driving column for the rest of the columns. When we moved task name over, then task became the driver for the rest of the columns. Okay, so let's see, we went over column properties and filters. Okay, I'm gonna close that. That is all we have for ICRW. Sarah, did anybody have any questions?
We just have a question. So you had mentioned that there's 2 separate subscriptions available, and one was a run only. The question was, does the run only subscription allow all user types to view the reports?
Based on each user's permissions to view the reports. So what you give that user access to will be what types of reports that they can see in ICRW that they can view. Or ICRW, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, and I think we can, I don't see any other questions at this time, but if there's any other questions that come up, we will certainly follow up, and please feel free to still submit them, and we can always come back to this. But Laura, if you want to continue on with the release portion.
Yep. Let me stop sharing just a minute so I can open that up. Okay. Maybe so. Everything a little bit out of the way. Okay. So as I'm assuming everybody knows, we had our first release of 2021 back on February the 19th. Hopefully you all have been able to get in and play around with some of these new releases and see what's going on and things that would be of value to add to your environments. So let's look at our release schedule first. So release 1 was February 19th. Release 2 will be May 21st. Release 3 will be August 20th. And release 4 will be right in time for Thanksgiving on November the 12th. So now we have our first polling question for our new releases. So do you typically watch the new release video or read the release notes when they are published? Yes, as soon as it is available. Yes, after the updates are released, or no?
Okay, Laura, almost everyone has submitted to the question, so we can go ahead.
Okay. I guess another answer could have been yes, when LBMC tells us about them.
Right.
This is an exciting time. I like releases. Okay. So the first area that we have are things that are across applications. I don't know how many of you have had this happen to you before when you're in the middle of working and all of a sudden you've hit that timeout limit and perhaps you didn't save what you were working on and it's gone. You have to start over. So Intacct has taken a very nice approach with this and they are giving us gentler, kinder timeouts. So we have the ability within company notifications to receive a notification about a minute before the inactivity duration is reached. And you can click to either stay signed in or signed out. So that's very helpful. Also, you'll receive a notification 1 minute before the session duration is coming to a close, and you'll be redirected to the sign-in page. If your browser provides a notification option, then you can set the permission to allow those notifications either from your user preference page in your company or directly in your browser settings. So the settings for your browser can vary by browser. I know there are several that different clients of ours use, so that is one option as well. So Intacct has also redesigned their help and training. The course is designed for new users. It familiarizes you with the Sage Intacct workplace and core functionality. You learn how to navigate the applications and menus, ways to personalize your workspace, how Dimensions streamline your chart of accounts, how to effectively use online help. You'll also see how to view, sort, and filter transactional data, as well as get an overview of reporting capabilities. There are 4 modules in this new Getting Started with Sage Intacct. The first is an introduction to Sage Intacct, navigating Sage Intacct, using lists, and then the reporting overview. This redesigned Getting Started course replaces the Navigating Sage Intacct, Getting Started with Reports, and Working with Dimensions. Okay, so next we have some new added features and enhancements in the administration and the company. So the first one we have is checklists. The place that you want to go in Intacct to add these is going to be company. There's a new all tab when you click in company, and then checklists. So checklists are going to allow you to track your high-level non-financial tasks, such as a monthly close, a yearly close, or compliance. I know a lot of different clients, and myself personally in my past, kept up with this in Excel. So this is a nice added feature to have all of your information housed and Intacct in one place. You'll create categories that are really meaningful to your processes, or different areas that you use, such as AP, AR, or GL. You can create statuses that will allow you a quick view as to where you are in the tasks, whether an item is started or is in progress or is complete. Intacct also provided a column that will give us a percentage complete. So you can see how far that particular task or assignment is from completion. You can create the checklist to track your processes, like a yearly close or a monthly close, prepaid reconciliations, subledger reconciliations. There are endless opportunities there for the different ways in which your business processes can be tracked to make sure they're completed. You can create assignments or tasks, which are used to reflect the processes that you want to track. The example that Intacct gives is for month-end close, you might want to track your GL, AP, and AR reconciliations. You could track to make sure that your books are closed for a month or a quarter, and then you can assign these to the person who is going to take ownership or responsibility in Intacct to make sure that those things are done. There is no limit on the checklist or the number of checklists that you can add or assignments. You can use categories to keep associated processes together and give each checklist and assignment a status so everyone is on the same page. If, for example, someone changes an assignee on the existing checklist, the person that you assign it to will be notified via email if the notification box is checked in the My Preferences. So in the upper right-hand corner of your Intacct environment is your name. If you click on that and then click on My Preferences, scroll down to the email notifications, and there will be a box for checklists. Go ahead and check that box if your company uses checklists, so you'll receive an email notification that you have been assigned a new one. Checklists can also be brought into a dashboard. For companies that use dashboards, you can include this item on a dashboard. Okay, our next area is going to be accounts receivable. Excuse me. Intacct has added a new feature where you can attach payments, or excuse me, you can attach attachments to payment receipts. So I know this is a feature that a lot of people have asked about over time. When you receive a payment, if you want to put a copy of a check or a copy of a note in that, you now have the ability to do that. So that is a wonderful new feature. You can add either an existing attachment or you can create a new one. Let's see. So here's the screen. You will need to be sure that you're using the new receive payment screen. This option is not available on the old one. The new one does say new beside it, so it's very clear that that's the new one versus the old one. But you will need to use that new receive payment link so that you'll have access to this. You can also use accounts receivable email templates to determine if the attachment is included when emailing. Okay, so the next thing that we have with our receiving of payments is overpayment dimensions. So if you receive a payment and it's an overpayment for the outstanding invoice amount, you can tag the overpayment amount to classes and projects. This will be grayed out if there's not an overpayment. My screen print is grayed out just to show you what that will look like. And that basically means there is not an overpayment amount. And the dimension fields will need to be enabled in the AR configuration if those are dimensions that you want to use with your overpayment tags. Okay, our next slide, we are going to go over some other receive payment enhancements that Intacct has added. So we now have column filters that are available in the select invoices for payment window. We also have the ability to drill down to invoice details. From the invoice detail page, you'll be able to drill down to the original invoice for more information by clicking on the invoice link in the summary header. Line detail dimensions are also going to be available to view on the details, or excuse me, on the invoice details page. You'll click show details to view the dimension details of specific line items. And then we can sort invoices and lines based on fields like customer name, invoice date, invoice number, and due date. And again, these features are only going to be available on the new receive payment screen. So make sure you're using that one. Okay, next we have some enhancements on the posted payments. So they've added some additional columns, account ID, so you can see the GL accounts that your payments post to from the list, and then the deposit status. So you'll be able to see if it's been undeposited, if it was deposited at the bank, and the bank account that it was deposited to. They've also added some advanced feature or filtering capabilities. This release, they added advanced filtering to the posted payments list, which allows you to filter based on multiple posted payment fields at once. And then the viewing of attachments, like we went over before, you can view the attachments from the payment list or the posted payment list. Okay. The next area that we have is in budgeting and planning. There are several enhancements that were added throughout this module. The new user face provides a step progress bar in the tooltip. There's also a collapsible management pane, so you can see more of your spreadsheet with the adjustable widths, column widths, and a back button to return to the previous step without losing the selections that you've made. The other enhancements that Intacct has added revolve around the employee-related GL accounts. So if you have things like benefits or compensations, 401k, the categories are identified by budgeting and planning, and the accounts are automatically mapped to the salaries and wages group budget line. Then you can display each component that makes up your total employee benefits, like benefits, taxes, accrued vacation, bonuses, by clicking on the total benefits drill down, and then you'll see your employee benefits breakout in the details view of your cash or your P&L preview. And then there's a new use and checkbox that's going to display the budget data that meets all of the tags that you choose when you add multiple tags in the tag field of advanced benefits per employee expense or per new employee expense budget lines. Okay, cash management this time has some pretty big updated and added features that I'm sure a lot of you are going to be really excited about. So the first one we'll go over is rolling out automatic downloads for bank feeds. So this is a feature that will allow your bank feeds to refresh every 4 hours. You won't need to wait until you reconcile your account or manually go in to refresh the feed. Instead, they'll work in the background behind the scenes, and every 4 hours you will have a refresh set of bank transactions. Should you be working in cash management and need in between that 4-hour time period to go ahead and bring the data in from the bank feeds, you can still pull those new transactions into the system simply by clicking the refresh button on the account record page, or you can always get to this through the reconciliation page. For now, in order to add this functionality to your company, you will need to send an email to bank-rec@sage.com, and they can add that functionality for you. All right, we also have enhancements for the bank feeds and the reconciliations. So users that don't have permissions can now, to the actual bank rec, can now create additional transactions from the bank feeds directly from the bank transactions list. So you can create fund transfers, service charges, interest fees, and you don't have to go back to the reconciliation page in order to do that. It can be done from the bank transactions list. Any of those entries or transactions that are created from the bank transaction list is automatically matched for reconciliation when you go to reconcile your bank account at the end of the month, which will speed up your month-end close. Okay. So here's another nice feature that we have. I know a lot of people have asked for this one as well, but it is improving the way that Intacct automatically matches multiple transactions with a lump sum at the bank. So before, if you had, say, 5 deposits in Intacct, but it's 1 deposit at the bank, that was a manual match for you. So that extra step, Intacct has gone and tried to alleviate a lot of that. So say you have the following transactions that were paid by ACH on the same date. The bank pulls the funds from the account in a single lump sum, which is what typically happens. So now Intacct will work to add those deposits that are in your Intacct file and lump them together with the lump sum at the bank. So when the lump sum payment comes into the system with the bank feed or with an import file as well, Intacct identifies and groups the transactions based on the issuing bank, the date, the document, or the check number. Total amount can also be included as well. Then Intacct will try to match the group to the lump sum with the amount and the document number, as well as any additional attributes that you have defined for that specific account. So this should make your reconciliation between being able to add entries from bank transactions and the grouping much easier at the end of the month. Okay, we have our next polling question. So do you use credit card transaction and do you use the credit card transaction and charge payoff functionality, or do you enter your credit card transactions as a vendor bill?
Okay, we have a little less than a minute left for this question. Okay, Laura, you can go on ahead. Thank you.
Sorry, I was getting a drink of water. Okay. That's this. So also in cash management, Intacct has added a little more visibility to the charge payoff and the credit card transaction records. So Once you have, or if you use credit card transactions and the charge payoffs, before you would have to go to the GL module and run a report. So you can see where those transactions were coded in Intacct. So Intacct has added the posting details tab within the credit card transaction and the charge payoff records. So now when you open either one of those, you'll have, in addition to the transaction tab, you'll also have the posting details where you can view the entries with the account numbers and the journals, the account names, all of the dimensions that you utilize, and the debit and credit amounts. So you can see exactly where those transactions are going. This will only work for accrual books. It will not work for cash books. Okay, so moving on from cash management, we're going to move down to general ledger. Intacct has released the general ledger outlier detection to everyone's environment now if you choose to turn it on. So when a transaction is sent for approval, the GL outlier detection uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to help approvers identify transactions that are outside of the historical pattern for their company. So for an example, say that historically transactions for the accounting department are always tied to the headquarters location. But then let's assume that a transaction is sent for approval and it uses the accounting department in the Texas location. So the GL outlier detection will note that there is a discrepancy between the history and what this new transaction is trying to post to. So it will give the approval person another data point to evaluate when deciding whether or not to approve the entry. A couple of things to note about this is it does use your historical data to evaluate the transactions that have been submitted for approval. And once you turn that functionality on, it will take about a month of historical data before this feature will start working properly, because it needs to track the patterns and learn the behavior of the transactions to know whether or not it's an outlier. You must have the journal entry approval turned on. This will not work without the workflow approval set on the different transactions. Let's see. You find this to turn it on in the company module under the subscriptions menu. There's not a charge or an additional charge for it. You just need to turn that on. And then here is the workflow, an example of the workflow where the approval, the journal entry approval is enabled and configured. The historical data exists, the services are subscribed to, and the GL outlier detection is enabled. Great. And then you have the configuration, and then the data is evaluated. The next step is going to be to flag outliers. And then the final step will be an approver action, either approving, editing, or declining. Okay, so our next area in general ledger is to delegate the GL approvals for journal entries when you're not available. And we now have the option to assign user groups as approvers. So the delegate approvals is like an out of the office option. Once the administrator sets up the delegation for journal entries, you can then find this feature in each approver's My Preferences. Again, that's up at the top right-hand corner. Click on your name and then My Preferences. Approvers can enable the delegation for journal entries to start sending the approval request to their delegated approver. If the delegated person is out of the office or if they have their delegate turned on. If it happens twice, then the notification attempts stop. And those will still be listed unless they're approved in the need to be approved journal entries. If you're using a user group rather than an individual as an approver, delegation is not going to be able to be turned on because other group members can approve submissions, whether you're in the office or not. So this will work for individuals. You won't be able to turn this on if you are a member of a group of approvers. So if you're an approver, you enable the approver delegation from your My Preferences page. It's located in the email notifications section. Then you'll enable the delegation for each approval area, general ledger and purchasing, or where it is now. When you enable it, the delegation begins immediately. This will only work from that point forward. It will not work for things that are still sitting there to be approved by that particular approver, excuse me. All right, the next part of this is why designate a group as an approver or a substitute? You want to designate a user group if it's possible to help spread the workload so that any member of the group can approve a transaction. So it's basically a group of people who can all approve the same journal entries. So there's a little caveat to that. When the approvals are set up, if the person submitting the transaction is not allowed to approve their own entries, then there's a process. If the person is allowed to approve their own entries, then there's another process. So we'll go over those. So when a journal transaction submitter is restricted from approving their own transactions, you will have the ability to choose both the approver and a substitute. For journal entries where the submitter is a member of a designated user group, no one in that group can approve the transactions. Only the substitute approver can approve those transactions. So if I create a transaction like a journal entry and I am in a group of people, no one in my group can approve that. It has to be a substitute approver if I'm not allowed to approve my own entries. Okay, so when the submitter of a journal entry is also an approver, the submitter can approve their own entries. Then, once those are submitted, the transactions are automatically approved when it's submitted, so there's no further action to take. When the submitter of a journal entry is also an approver and the submitter and can't approve their own entries, then the substitute approver is notified and can take the approval action over. Okay, so to limit Intacct suggestion to limit complexity in the pool of approvers in an approval setup, you can designate a user group as either the approver or the substitute approver, but not both. So you're not limited. So you can have an approver group and a substitute group. So it's not limited to one person. Okay. So we have some new features in inventory. Let's see, before this release, only average and standard costing methods had the ability to track certain items. Now we have 4 trackable items that are available in the first in, first out method of costing. So those are going to be your bin tracked items, your lot tracked items, your serial tracked items, and then items tracked by multiple methods. So like I said before, this functionality was not available in FIFO, and it is now with this release. Okay, so some more inventory. For those of you that build kit transactions, stockable kits, You used to have to do that manually, and Intacct, you did not have the ability to import build kit transactions. So Intacct has added that functionality in. In order to do this, you need to go to the build kits list page. And then on that page is going to be an import button. You'll click that button. You can download the new import template. And then it has also the screen where you can upload the CSV file within that page as well. So if I understand correctly, that is not on the company import data tab. So you'll actually need to go into the build kits list page to use that functionality. All right, so a little more inventory updates for us. We now have visibility into the bin contents. This will make it easier for warehouse managers to manage their inventory and see what they have as far as quantity is concerned. So in the bin items tab, that's a new tab on the bin information page. So you can click on that tab and it will allow you to see the item ID, the description, any kind of lot, serial, or expiration information, but it will also show you the quantity of that particular bin. Okay, so we have some updates to the multi-entity, the auto default location and entity. So let's see. So this feature can be used in general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, time and expenses, cash management, and time sheets in the project application. I probably should have gone through what it can't be used in because that list is smaller. Right now, the feature doesn't currently apply to order entry, purchasing, inventory, contracts, or construction. So there are really two features with the auto defaulting location and entity. Instead of entering an entity or location for every transaction, Intacct now will automatically assign a default location and entity when you're working in a single entity that's part of a multi-entity company. So this means that every time you create a new transaction, Intacct automatically enters the entity or location for you when you save that transaction. So for multi-entity environments that use multi-entity, there are a few notes. So locations are filtered to include only those locations that your permissions enable you to access. So if you don't typically have access to location A, B, or C, then the default will not save to those for you. You can also change the location by setting it explicitly, in other words, telling it what location to choose. You're overriding the default, or by editing the transaction and selecting a different one. So if you use a different system default for location or entity, then that default takes precedence over the default location or entity that Intacct designates here. So for example, if you're working with expenses or timesheets or bank transactions, that default will take precedence over the auto default new functionality in location and entity. You can overwrite the system default value for location and entity when you're working with expense reports, timesheets, and cash management transactions, either by manually deleting the location and the transactions and then save it. When you save the location, or excuse me, when you save the transaction without a location, Intacct assigns the transaction location to the default entity. I lost my mouse. So we have our next polling question. How many entities are in your Intacct environment?
Okay, Laura, we've got most of the answers back. We still have about 30 seconds left. But Laura, if you want to go ahead and continue.
Okay. Okay, so the next area that we have some added functionality is in projects. Every organization has expenses, and expense transactions usually generate document attachments that you'll probably need later, such as purchase slips, paid bills, canceled checks, receipts. Collecting and keeping source document attachments with the right project or grant invoice takes quite a bit of time, but Intacct has added direct access to source attachments from the project or grant invoices. So now, an example of this would be to comply with grant terms. Organizations may need audit access to their original expense transactions or their source documentation to qualify allowable cost. So you can see in this workflow that you'll create your source documents with attachments. Of course, they can be expense reports, an AP bill, purchasing, timesheet entries, or journal entries. Then you'll generate the project invoice, and then you'll email that project invoice and choose to either include or exclude the source document attachments. And then you can review the project invoice in those attachments as well. Okay, given that we had ICRW in the beginning of this, I'm really excited about some of the new reporting additions and functionality and enhancements that we have this release. I think you guys will be too. So Intacct has released the Interactive Visual Explorer as an add-on subscription for all customers or clients if you choose to add that onto your environment. Basically, it's an analytics and data visualization application that will enable you to explore and interact with your data. I've seen this in limited applications. I haven't spent a lot of time in here yet, but it really looks interesting as far as the different graphs that you can create and the different visual impacts that you can have when presenting your data. So that's something new that is now available as an add-on subscription for all customers. Okay, so next in reporting, we have something that I think a lot of you are going to be really excited about as well, and this is the ability to schedule financial reports with department and location managers selected. So the way that Intacct has set this up is with your locations or location groups or your department groups. If you add a manager to those different departments, locations, or groups of those, then we can schedule financial reports to be emailed to the individual that is responsible for the location or department. So instead of running, say, an income statement, 3 or 4 times for different locations and then emailing those out if those users don't have access to Intacct, you can actually now schedule those reports to run, and they'll be emailed to that department or location manager. So the first step is going to be to make sure that you have a manager listed on either or all of your locations, your departments, or your groups of locations and departments if you use dimension groups in your reporting. Then you'll go to your reports, decide which report you'll need to do it one at a time. Each report will need to be created on a schedule individually. But you'll go to reports and then all in financial reports. You'll choose the report that you want to schedule. You'll click schedule. You will, let me talk through this and then I'll show you what this looks like. You'll choose which departments or groups of departments, locations or groups of locations that you want to send this report to. Make sure that those have a listing of multiple, or it won't work properly. Then go ahead and set the rest of the information in your scheduler. And down at the bottom in your delivery options, you're going to choose email. And then you're going to see the associated manager on the dimension record is going to be, you'll need to check that as well. And then you'll see a merge field in the two. So let me show you what this looks like. Okay. So when you go to schedule your report, like up at the top, you've got your location or your group. For this example, I chose a group of locations that has multiple locations in it. Then I selected individual report. Then down in the delivery options, I chose email. And then I also clicked and checked the associated manager on the dimension record. And then you'll notice in the to email address, it has the merge field dimension manager. So if you have an IT department and an accounting department, and they run a report, you run a report for them or schedule a report to run for them, it will email to that person on that record, either department or location, where the project or the manager's name is filled in. And it will have the correct address, the correct email address when it is scheduled and sent out. So if there's not a manager on a department or a location, and you select this to run with the associated manager on that dimension record, the reports will be sent to the person scheduling the report or to the administrator if the person scheduling the report is no longer with the company. If you select the individual reports across dimensions, or if the same manager is associated with more than one selected dimension, that manager might get multiple reports attached to a single email. So just keep that in mind as well. Okay, so the next area that we have is the financial report writer date preview. So this is going to allow you to preview the dates that the report spans while you're building or editing your financial reports. It will also show when you're being prompted to add those dates. So when creating a report, you use the as of date to provide insights on the dates that will be used in the preview or run functions. You'll also get the time frame in the columns that are present based on the as of date prompt value. So as you can see here, an as of date was entered of 12/31/2020. And in each of the columns, it's going to give you the dates that are associated with those columns. Then for expanded columns, you'll see the dimension period. For example, the current year will show it monthly. The date range also appears when you're selecting the as of date as a prompt when you're running the report. So you can easily see the dates that are included. Okay. All right, the next feature that we have is the ability to see the features. So if you want, excuse me, I said features, filters. If you want the filters to be visible on your report, you can choose to add those to the footer. You'll open the report for editing, or you can do this when you create the report. You'll go to the Format tab, and in the Page Footer option, select the Show Filters tab and Prompt Selection. So this will show that filter information at the bottom of the report down at the footer. I will give you a little warning. The ones that I have seen have been rather complicated reports and have had a lot of different filters applied to those reports. So it can get a little long. So be sure you preview that to see if it's something that will work for your environment. Okay, so I don't know about you all, but I do not like zeros in a report. I would much prefer to have a dash. So this one probably makes me the most excited as far as reports and insights go. we now have the ability to use a dash instead of a 0. So all of the reports, if you should select this option, will show a dash versus a 0 on your reports. So to do this, you'll open the financial report and go to the Format tab. Down in the General section, there is a box to check to display dash for zeros. This is what your report will look like when it presents its dashes. When you view this in HTML or a PDF format, the dashes will remain intact. If you export it to Excel or a CSV file, it will not retain the dash, and it puts the number 0 back in. So I think it's a little cleaner to use a dash, but that's just my personal opinion. And I was very excited about that one. Okay, so we have some other areas in Intacct that have some added features or enhanced functionality in web services. There are several things. I think the thing that is the most interesting at this point is for inventory control. There's a new available inventory object that provides the available quantity for tracked items according to a serial number, lot number, and bin number, and so forth. So that's one area that was added in web services. In contracts, there's some new functions that can clear the MEA allocations to reset the applicable revenue schedules to the amounts that existed prior to those allocations. Let's see. In the construction early adapter program, the price conversion for order entry transactions is now supported. Let's see. And then customization and platform services. There's some added functionality for the CSP administration, or yes, administration. Okay. Construction has some new and updated features. You can track production units and project estimates. You can convert order entry transaction lines based on price, not quantity. And then some things that were updated. Construction early adopter program expands some functionality using project estimates and price conversions and order entry, and approval of change order transactions and purchasing. Contracts has a few new added features as well as enhanced features. The new fair value effective date configuration option. So you choose whether to base the MEA allocations on the fair value that is in effect as of a contract line start date or the MEA allocation effective date. There's a new ability to customize the contract line grid, and the line level billing frequencies have changed for contracts as well. And then some additional enhanced features. The one that I noticed was the MEA allocations have moved, so you'll want to take note of that as well. Okay, this is our last poll question. So what is your favorite new feature or enhancement from release 1?
Laura, I thought we could go over a couple of questions. There was one that we received, and they asked if you could explain more on entities. Are they locations or companies? For example, they have 2 companies and about 80 locations.
How many locations? I'm sorry.
80.
Oh. Yes, I believe the functionality is for entities and possibly locations. Let's see. It looks like it could be for both entity and location, depending on how it's configured. I can find out though, if you'll make a note of
Okay, yep. We'll follow up
that.
with that.
Yeah.
Also, there were a couple of questions on the checklist.
Mhm.
The first question was, they weren't seeing checklists as an option and wanted to see if you knew why. If that's something maybe you need to enable, or how you see the checklist.
Yes. That is going to be, I'll show you. It's in the permissions. Just go to myself. Hang on. Let's see. I believe it's in company. Yep. So in the individual user permissions or the role permissions, if you open those permissions for company, the company setup checklist is in there. So that will have to be enabled. And then down towards the bottom, you'll have checklist, checklist categories and checklist statuses. You also have the assignment categories and statuses down at the bottom. And then you've got your administrator will have the ability to add the list, or to include the list, the view, the add, the edit, and delete. So that is in each user's permissions within the company module.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for showing that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other question around checklists was, when you create a month-end checklist, can you duplicate it so that it doesn't have to be recreated in each subsequent month?
I actually thought of that earlier before we had the call, and I didn't have time to check. Let me check and I'll let you know.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Oh, does Intacct offer an import template for the checklist?
Add that to the list. I'm not sure either.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. Those are all the questions that I see, but we will certainly follow up with those questions. We'll follow up individually with everybody. Laura, did you have anything else?
No, I was just going to say, when you send out the file, you've got a link here to the release notes. The only other thing that I wanted to be sure to show you is that when you're in Intacct, on the home screen, there we go. A lot of times people will set their home screen to go to the area that they are actually working in, but on the home screen, they will add the release notes for the current release that's coming out. That is a great place to go to find out what's going to happen or what's going to come out. And then these videos are fantastic. You can either watch the videos in their entirety, or if you only say work in AP or only cash management or AR, you can actually go and they'll have a short, less than 10-minute video for each module that goes over some of the main highlights. So be sure to check that out in here. A little bit before the next release in May, they'll add the release notes for R2. So that's a good place to go to get information. That will also give you additional information for where to go to turn features on. When Intacct has the 4 releases a year, they do not update user permissions. So in your environment, you'll need to go, like, for example, the checklist where it doesn't show up, you'll need to go in the user permissions or have an admin go in the user permissions to update those. But those release notes will tell you where that information is as far as the modules and what you need to add as far as permissions are concerned to see some of the new release things. So that is all I have.
Great. Thank you, Laura, so much for all the updates on Interactive Custom Report Writer and the new release. We really appreciate your time today, and everyone that attended today, thank you for attending. We will follow up with an email with the recording and slides from today's presentation, and we'll follow up with everybody that had questions. We'll follow up with you individually. And if there's any additional questions you have, please feel free to send that to techhelp@lbmc.com. We'll also send out a survey. We'd really love to get your feedback. So if you can fill that out, and we'd like to hear about any topics you'd like to know more about. And thank you for attending today. We hope you have a great rest of the day.